do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And I think, like, we could simplify that and say, when you treat others well, good things will happen. And I really think that, it's one of those things. And by the way, that can be very hard in business. I often think that sometimes popular culture doesn't teach us that. But I think at the end of the day, life is short. You have to you have to be just really cordial and polite with people that you're closer to. Treasure those moments. And I think when we lose sight of that, we probably are not the leaders we should be.
Welcome to the Break Free podcast. I am your host, David Mancera. I have dedicated this podcast to honor the people that are changing this world for a better place. And today we have with us one of them, Gordon Lawson. Gordon, welcome to the show.
Thank you, David. Pleasure to be with you.
Gordon, for the audience, can you give me your full name? Where do you live and what do you do for a living?
Yes, Gordon Lawson. I live in the Augusta, Georgia area, and I'm CEO of a company called Conceal, a cybersecurity company.
Conceal cybersecurity company. Cybersecurity has a long range of disciplines. Most people just know the antivirus type of cybersecurity. Can you be a little bit more specific?
Yeah, so at Conceal, and it's conceal.io is our address. Basically, what we're doing is we're making every browser secure. So, the vast majority of people's days are spent in a browser environment. They're surfing the web, they're looking at using applications, obviously clicking on links and email. And what we're seeing is that a lot of the bad actors, or threat actors, as we would call them in cyber, they target the browser in order to, inject ransomware or malware or credential theft to conduct those attacks on companies and individuals. And so our approach is that we secure the browser we scan all those URLs all the time, and we're trying to make sure that anything bad is in a place where it's isolated, it can't affect the user or the company. And that's really where we've seen success at Conceal.
That's beautiful. How long have you been working there, or have you been influencing this company?
So I've been in cybersecurity for about a decade. I've been CEO here for 3 years, and we've seen a ton of growth. We've gone from less than 5 customers to we're approaching 400 customers today.
That is amazing. Now tell me, Gordon, you started when the pandemic was going on, didn't you?
Yeah, it was kind of right after. Yeah. But it was still right in the thick of it. So the crazy thing about the pandemic is it slowed down a lot of industries, but in cybersecurity, there was actually like unprecedented amounts of investment. So that was good for the industry. But of course, even though people are working from home, doesn't mean that the bad guys stop attacking, right? In fact, it made people more vulnerable. So I think what we've seen is that the demand for cybersecurity and need for cybersecurity has gone up immensely since the pandemic.
What do you see, Gordon, that is the major factor contributing to your exponential growth?
I think one of the things that we really focus on, I think there's a couple things. At Conceal, we focus, and I think any business is successful should focus on this, is we try and take care of our customers, right? We want to make sure that customers have a delightful experience, that it's easy for them to deploy our product, it's easy for them to buy our product, the price point is very reasonable and fair, and that at the end of the day, we're providing a great service that protects them from some of the most dangerous threats out there. And then, that's sort of our external facing approach. And then, David, I think one of the things that, that maybe sometimes companies lose sight of is you need to be commercially focused internally. You need to have a focus on revenue and go to market. And I do some teaching at universities or in the area, and I sometimes I'll ask students, like, who wants to be in sales? And no one raises their hand, right? Because like sales has a negative connotation. Well, I started my career as a naval officer, but then I got into sales and I became CEO of a company. And I said, if you don't have sales, the lights don't stay on. And so I think really you can have both these things. You can have a great sales team that's focused on taking care of customers, but also driving results internally. And I think when those two things are kind of in sync, like magical things happen.
And you're completely right. And I call it the winning triangle, right? You have sales, marketing, and delivery or production, right? Those three have to work like the engine of a high-end speed car, like an F1 Formula car.
Right.
If one of those focus points are not working properly, the company doesn't take off the ground, and it just staggers. So for example, in my example, I was a software engineer that wanted to be my own boss, and I had the same mentality. Oh, I don't want to do sales. Sales, it has a bad connotation to it. Marketing, I was okay with it, but I didn't know anything about marketing. So as a result, I will go and get my first project as an entrepreneur, and I grew to 3 people with that project. And then I was happy building the project. We delivered on time, delighted the client, so production was working great. And then the project ended, and we had no more sales. So I had to go out again and find more clients. And I kept repeating that. What really saved me was the word of mouth, because the production quality was so high that other people started recommending me to other people, which is basically marketing. That's the best marketing you can get, the word of mouth marketing.
Yeah.
But little did I know that if I needed to have a stable business, I needed to build a strong sales and marketing team. But in my engineering mind, I just thought it was a waste of money.
I know it's hard. You really have to have both. I mean, product is so important, but I think sometimes people get this impression that if you have a great product, people are just going to come. It doesn't work like that. You have to have all of those elements. And I think the other thing too is like marketing can be in sync with taking care of a customer. One of the things that has gotten a lot of buzz that I truly believe in is product-led growth. So like at Conceal, we offer up a free community license. Anyone with a corporate domain can get 5 free licenses for forever. But the idea is that when someone comes in and they're showing interest as part of our marketing outreach, they're showing interest. Then when we call them to follow up, sometimes it might say, you know what, I just want to play with it, leave me alone. A lot of times they'll say, you know what, I'm in a 10,000 person company and I want to hear about it for all my colleagues. But it's more of a natural feeling instead of like cold calling people and forcing yourself. And this to me is like a great way to expand and market the company without making people feel uncomfortable.
And it's beautiful. And let's talk a little bit about cold calling, because you have to do whatever it takes at the beginning. I have interviewed many people in this podcast, and one guy, a multimillionaire in finance, I asked him, so how do you get going? Like my roadblock, my mental limitations was, how do I crack the marketing code? Because I finally learned how to sell myself. Like I knew that if I got a client in front of me, if they needed my services, they will be sold.
Right.
Because I had the technical expertise, so I was my own sales engineer and my own salesperson. But the marketing part, trying to actually get leads in front of me, that was the hardest part. So I asked this guy, and he said, David, when we started back in 1990 something, you picked up the phone and you called people, and that's all you did all day long. And so his measure was how many calls he could do in the day.
Yeah.
And he said he called about 5,000 people, and that made him a multimillionaire.
Yeah. I think, there's definitely something to it. We're working on a deal with my team, and I walked out today and I said, give me the number. And the guy didn't pick up, but I said, hey, it doesn't hurt to get a voicemail from the CEO, right? Like, I feel like we're all working towards the same goal. So a lot of my day is, I talk to investors or I'm talking on strategic partnerships. So I'm very comfortable, talking to strangers. But I think that it's always good for, no matter like what role you have in a company, to be able to pick up and, be ready for someone to say no. Rejection's just part of it, but if you have the resilience, then good things will happen.
And that's another great point. people are afraid to reach out because of the fear of rejection.
Mhm.
And fear of rejection just shows that you have an ego that you haven't dealt with.
Mhm.
If you feel offended because somebody says no thank you, it's because you have something that is getting hurt inside of you, and that's called your ego, yourself.
Right.
Once you lower yourself to a point that you say, I'm here to provide a service, and if you believe in the product and service that you're providing, you should be okay saying, okay, that person don't need my services. Let's move to the next one.
Right.
But we get hurt, right, with the rejection. That's why nobody wants to be a salesperson, because people are afraid of getting rejected, right?
Well, I mentioned I started as a naval officer and then I did defense contracting. And I remember when my first kind of sales roles were very like niche products, like helicopter components, where you only had maybe 24 potential customers in the world, right? And so rejection was really hard. Like if it didn't work out, you didn't have a lot of places to go. One of the exciting things about cybersecurity, and I think this is actually true with probably anyone that has a consumer-facing product or anyone that sells into, especially like smaller businesses, when you have such a huge addressable market, you don't have to worry about rejection. There's a lot of places where someone will say yes, but I think also you have to be open-minded that if someone's saying no, you have to be able to understand if you're seeing trends, you can't be so overly optimistic or have happy ears that if you're seeing trends of people saying no, we'll fix that problem so that you have a higher chance of success in the future.
That is so important too. Wow, so many golden nuggets, Gordon. Yes, because it's not only about not getting offended when you get rejected, but also listening to the client, what the client is saying. Because if they say no enough times, you can form a pattern. If you form a pattern, you can pivot. So you can start having your product market fit better and better and better each time. The same thing happened to us. And by the way, for the listeners, I'm not saying that you need to pick up the phone and make 500 calls a day, because probably those days are over. I'm
Right.
actually pretty sure those days are over. That's why you have the internet now. You have many ways to create leads through marketing, right? Inbound sales, for example, inbound marketing. I love inbound marketing. Calling is outbound, right? You are reaching out. There is many ways to do inbound. You can do Google AdWords. You can do internet marketing via email. You can do blogging. You can do, there's so much more, right, than you used to have before. But the same problem persists. If what you're doing is not bringing the results you want, you have to pick up the trend and fix it. Now, the fixing part doesn't have to be a radical change. It's, 2%, 3%, 1%. And you keep rotating that until you finally have the product market fit. That's what happened to me. The last thing that I needed to delegate was the marketing part. So I have 7 self-managing companies. The other 5 of them, other CEOs that are my partners run them.
Mm-hmm.
But my main business was the one that I was still on. And then I have a real estate business that is completely a different business model. But my main business was the hardest for me to delegate. It took me 3 years. And I could actually delegate sales. That was hard, super hard. It took me many, many, many months to delegate sales. But then the marketing part, I was still the one bringing the real leads. Yeah. And it took a long time, but we were pivoting until finally marketing took off. And then the company started to take off because one guy was bringing all the leads. Now I have a team. All I need to do is add more dollars to that team, more bodies to that team, and then the company grows exponentially.
Yeah.
Right?
No, it's so interesting. One thing I wanted to hone in on when you said that little changes can have big impacts. I think you could do the analogy. I was a naval officer, and I forget the exact numbers, but when you're 2 degrees off course, if you go 2 degrees for 1,000 miles, 1,000 nautical miles, you're going to be in the wrong continent. So, so that once again, and I think sometimes, and I've had to learn this lesson a lot, radical movements when you're leading a company can be really hard, but little micro movements that you can track and adjust on and iterate on, those can have really great effects. And I think what sometimes, if I ever see other companies where they're maybe having issues with something, it's like someone's so myopic or so set in their ways that they're not willing to make little changes. And I mean, I kind of approach especially like startup or venture-backed world or early stage or even growth stage, as you need to be willing to make adjustments. It's like a puzzle. How do you fit the puzzle together to optimize every day? You know.
For sure. Gordon, I'm so impressed that you actually have a naval background. Let's talk about that.
Sure.
Let's look back in time. Last year of high school, what was in your head and what did you decide to do?
Oh, geez, it's a while ago. You know, well, we're just coming off the Army Navy game, which is, you know, I think one of the best sporting events of the year. And I went to the Naval Academy, so someone summed this up very well. And I say this with all humility, but the Army Navy game is the only football game played every year where both participants, all the players, are willing to give their lives for their country. Like that's you know, hopefully that never happens, but it's asked to them. And you know, I had classmates that were killed in wars from Naval Academy, and certainly a lot from the, you know, early 2000s from West Point and Navy. But you know, regardless of that, and obviously, you know, we think about their sacrifice. But when I was a senior in high school, was you know, 1996, you know, kind of a pretty much peacetime. I was really excited about potentially going to the Naval Academy. I was going to high school in Virginia. My father had been enlisted during the Navy during Vietnam. My father-in-law had been a naval officer. My grandfather, actually, I never knew him. He fought in World War I. So kind of a long legacy within our family. And you know, I just thought it was really, really cool to, when I visited the academy and had gone up there in the summer, and was lucky enough to get in. It's really competitive. I probably would not be able to get in now, but I was very honored to be accepted, and it was an incredible experience there in Annapolis.
So when you go to academy, it's almost going like West Point. You become an officer after you graduate.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, there's West Point, there's Annapolis, there's the Air Force Academy, Coast Guard Academy. So yes, they all are 4 years. They're like a 4-year university.
And then you get what's the ranking that you get after you graduate?
For a naval officer, it's an ensign, is what they call it, which would be the equivalent of a second lieutenant in the Army or the Marine Corps. So, yeah.
Wow, that's incredible, because that in itself is a career, right?
Well, a lot of folks stay in for a career. I think we're going to be very close. Like my class will have our first admiral. If we haven't already, it's probably happening very soon. The first, you know, person to reach admiral rank. A flag rank, as they call it, which is it's crazy how the time flies. But you know, when I graduated, I went to a ship. It was, you know, kind of early 2001. Went to a ship in Norfolk, a destroyer. We of course, 9/11 happens. We go on deployment, and went to the Persian Gulf and to the Mediterranean, and it really, you know, actually really amazing to be able to see different parts of the world, because as I got into the corporate world, I did so much international business, and sort of my lens on international business was, I think, aided by being able to, we had to interact with Egyptian naval officers, Turkish naval officers, Greek naval officers, I mean, all over the world. And it definitely helped kind of be able to, you know, there's ideas of building bridges and establishing consensus. Those are important skills that I thought the military was very good at helping to build.
That's beautiful. And by the way, thank you so much for your service.
Thank you.
You know, when people, especially this new generation, when people start doing these riots and these protests, and they don't even know what they are protesting for, I realize that they have no idea the price it takes to live in a free world. You know, and when they are like pro-terrorist groups and pro-dictatorships, I'm like, you guys have no idea the blood that has been sacrificed by our own people, by the past, for us to have this freedom and enjoy it. Like, they don't even make their math. Like, you know, sorry that I take this out in this podcast. I mean, it's supposed to be a business podcast, but, you know, some of these people that are protesting are, you know, I saw ladies dressed with very tight clothes, and, you know, people of the LGBT movement, without knowing that if they lived in that country, they would have been killed. They would have been hanged by a tree, because it's completely prohibited what they're doing with their lifestyle, because it's a country that has no freedom, right?
Yeah, you know, I think if you talk to people in the military, I think that we're, you know, folks that have served, and I think the vast majority of this, and will always say, I'm glad that people here have the right to freedom of expression and freedom of speech. That's why, I'm a huge fan of the US Constitution. I think it was written almost perfectly. If you think about the checks and balances that were in place, and obviously we're never perfect and how we implement everything, but what an amazing country that you can go out and have those discussions. You can protest in that way. Obviously, there are certain lines that the rule of law keeps in check, which is great too. If you don't like who's in the White House, you can flip them out every 4 years. If you don't like who's in Congress, you can flip them out every 2 or 6 years. What an amazing system. And I think that one of the things that I'm always encouraged by too is they ask what institutions people in the United States have the most faith in. Usually the military and firefighters are 1 and 2. As long as those folks are 1 and 2, I'm really happy, because I think it's critical that no matter where you are politically, at least if we honor the people that have made that ultimate sacrifice, when we lose sight of that, then we're going to have real problems. But we got to keep that in mind. And I think the other thing, once again, I know it's a business podcast, but I just want to share this too, is like, keep in mind, folks that lost their life in the early 2000s or mid 2000s, we may be 10, 15, 20 years on from that. Those children are still dealing with that loss. Those spouses are still dealing with that loss. And so it's really, I think, important to, no matter how much time goes by, that doesn't make it easier for them. And we have to keep that memory alive.
For sure, Gordon. And what a blessing, talking about freedom of expression, that America and Canada were built, our founding fathers were Christian based, were people that were persecuted in Europe that wanted to have the freedom of religion. So if you look at our constitutions, they're very similar. And one of the things is freedom of expression and freedom of speech, and then freedom of religion. Mm-hmm. The fact that I'm a born again Christian and I love Jesus and I follow Jesus Christ doesn't mean that I don't have to respect somebody else's beliefs.
Right.
And I keep telling people, these countries are prosperous because my freedom ends with my neighbor's freedom starts. Mm-hmm. So as long as we can respect that and we can have a dialogue, we will continue to prosper and be free.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. Mm-hmm.
It's beautiful. Wow. How long did you serve in the naval system? For how long?
I was there about 6 years on active duty, and then I did another almost 10 years with reserve time. So you can stay on active duty where you get for 20 years, but I decided to move to the corporate world after about 6 years.
After 6 years, what was in your mind to make such a radical change? Because it's completely different.
Yeah. I will say, I think, David, a lot of people don't realize that, like, the military can be a very tough life. You're moving around every couple years. It's very, very competitive. Obviously, you have to get the right assignments and do those things. And I think for me, I had gotten married, wanted to have a family, and those things were, I just, wanted a little bit more stability. The nice thing about the reserves is I could still go do some fun things. Like, I did a lot of time with the Marine Corps in the reserves, which was really fun. Jumping out of planes and doing some of that stuff. And so I feel like I kind of got the best of both worlds, got to start a corporate career, could still do some time in the military and spend time with family. So it worked out well.
That is beautiful. Was it hard for you to get into the civilian world?
Yeah, it is. I think it is. It's I think a lot of people would say that. I think the first thing is, I wasn't sure what I wanted to do. I mean, at one point I thought, should I go to law school? I'd actually gotten an MBA while I was on my last shore tour in the Navy. So I kind of had some exposure to business. Should I go into finance? Should I go into sales? I ended up going into sales. I ended up going to like more of a capital equipment type sales and defense contracting type sales. And, like I said, it was a great lesson of, I think, what keeps the lights on in a business and being able to do that from the ground up. And I was lucky enough to get into cybersecurity. Actually, interesting story. I sat next to the founder of a company on a flight to the UK. He asked me if I'd ever thought about going into cyber. I didn't know this gentleman from anyone, right? He'd asked me if I was interested in cyber. Said, know nothing about it. He makes me head of sales for his company. We have a $400 million exit 3 years later, and that was how I got into cyber. So, I tell people, never prejudge what you want to do, and always talk to strangers on planes, because you never know who you're going to meet. But it's funny how life kind of works out, right?
It's beautiful. I'm old enough to know that coincidence is non-existent. It's all preordained.
Right.
Think about it. Like, what are the odds that the person beside you will give you a gig, such an important gig, to advance your career?
I know. It's amazing. It's amazing. So, yeah.
How do you relate your leadership skills from the military into the corporate world? Did that help you?
It did. I always think that I could give some kind of highbrow answer, right? This is the one that I think is the most important. When this is anyone who's in the military, you learn how to be uncomfortable, right? You learn how to be uncomfortable. That's a really important skill. And no matter how uncomfortable it is, you still need to do your duty. So if it's super hot outside and you're standing at attention, you can't scratch your face. Like, I may be on a podcast right now and I want to scratch my nose, but I'm not going to, because it's the discipline, right? It's the discipline that teaches you about, you can work through the discomfort. And so those things apply. You may have uncomfortable conversations with investors, with customers, with partners, but you still need to show up and be professional. And I think those are critical skills. I think the other piece that I always talk about, and I'm certainly not perfect at this and always trying to be better, is when you're in a leadership role in the military, everyone's watching you. Your sailors are watching you, the Marines are watching you. If you do something inappropriate, or you act inappropriately, or not without, doesn't mean you have to be everyone's best friend, but you have to show compassion, and you have to, show leadership, right? You have to show leadership. It's the same thing in the corporate world. When you're in the CEO chair, you have to maintain that dignity, that rapport, and those things. And I think, in the military, you call it like your command influence. I don't know necessarily, like, it's a different word in the corporate world, right? But that professionalism is critical in both areas. And so I think those are things that I try and think about, try and practice, hopefully, try and get better with it every day.
This is one of the things why most people never make it on life. They never learn how to discipline their bodies. Mm-hmm. And now we're talking spirituality again, right? Because if you think about it, you just mentioned that if you want to scratch your nose and you're in a podcast, you are actually going to ignore it, even though it's going to be super uncomfortable. You're going to be, I am the owner of my body, mm-hmm. and I am the one that decides how this body should operate. Mm-hmm. And that's because your soul is in charge, and your spirit is in charge of your soul. And so if you want to put it in human terms, your soul is your consciousness, is your thoughts, your feelings, is your memories, is your logical thinking, is your ability to decide. Once your spirit disciplines your conscious, your soul, then you're able to discipline your body. Mm-hmm. And the military is the best to teach you how to do that. I was in military for 2 years, and those 2 years changed my life completely. Something as simple as I cannot leave my room without making my bed. Mm-hmm. I don't know if there was a book written about this, because there was a commencement speech by an admiral, right?
Admiral McRaven. He was the head of Special Operations Command. He was the admiral in charge when we caught bin Laden. Yeah, and he became the president of the University of Texas, but he said the first thing in the morning was make your bed. So it's a great book.
When I saw that, I'm like, yeah, like I've been doing that since I was in military. Yeah. But the analogy is this: it's like, it doesn't matter how you feel or what your body wants. If you know it's not going to service you or the people that depend on you, you will not do it. Mm-hmm. That discipline is so required to be successful in life, regardless of what you want to do, but especially if you have becoming a high-ranking officer in a corporation like you, like me.
Yeah.
Right. And you're right.
Absolutely.
Everybody's watching you. Everybody watches you. For me, like, it's culture, right? Like, so people think that culture is some nice words on a billboard, at the office, and it's not. Culture is what.
Excuse me. We talked
No,
about
no worries.
I couldn't discipline that one. I'm sorry. Excuse me.
Bless you, man.
Thank you.
Going back about culture is actually real. Either you have a good culture or you don't have you have a bad culture. But every company has a culture, and turns out that the leadership of the company is the one that sets the culture.
Right.
When I was scuba diving, my instructor, my dive master, told me, this is how you operate underwater.
Mm-hmm.
When you move your head, the rest of your body follows.
Right.
And it's exactly the same way in a business. If you want to have a culture of integrity, a culture of a benevolent culture, a culture of helping each other out, a culture of delighting your clients, you better start with yourself, because nobody will follow through if they see the leadership not acting accordingly, right?
Absolutely. No, for sure. So, and I mean, that doesn't mean, I think the other thing too is like, there's this whole discussion about culture. Well, first off, culture is really tough when you're losing, right? So you got to make sure that those things we talked about, if you're not winning, you got to make the course corrections to do the things that get you up to success. Because I don't think there's too many failing companies that have great culture. It's like, it's hard. It's really hard. But that means you're going to have setbacks. And I think the culture helps build resilience. And, you have to make sure you keep those things in mind. You got to do the right things to build success, because I don't think anyone wants to be part of a place that's going in a negative direction.
And actually, culture is what saves businesses. For me, when I was going on there, I realized what I just told you, that I had a culture. It wasn't a billboard that I put at the boardroom, right?
Right.
And then I started shifting the culture. I started changing the culture, starting with myself. Everything turned around. Incredible, because it was, if you look at failing businesses, most of the time it's because their culture sucks.
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. I think the other thing, this really resonated with me. It was a Wall Street Journal article this past weekend with the founder of NVIDIA. He's still the CEO. His mantra is that we're 30 days from going out of business. Now, keep that in mind. NVIDIA has a $1 trillion market cap. There's only like 6 companies, Apple, Amazon, I'm missing a couple, but there's only like 6 companies that have $1 trillion market cap. He has one, and his mantra is still, we're 30 days from going out of business. And they had lots of failures when they started. Obviously, with AI and the compute power needed, they've been quite successful now. But I think complacency is also a factor, that you can have complacency and a great culture and a dying business. And so, like, from my perspective, be like paranoid and always taking care of your customer, looking at the trends, build that great culture, and make sure that what the metrics that you're tracking, that you're hitting those metrics, and that you're not deluding yourself that everything's happy. Because I think that's also where you can get into some dangerous waters.
For sure. Every time that I will run into troubles in my businesses is when we were doing so well that we let go of the metrics, we let go of the discipline, and we started hiring left, right, and center, thinking that we're going to need the people. And before you know, we're losing millions of dollars. Mm-hmm. So my analogy for that now is, when I talk to my board of directors, when I talk to my leaders, is I tell them, guys, the company is like taking care, the business is like taking care of your human body. If you don't weigh yourself at least once a week, if you don't watch what you eat, it doesn't matter how fit you are. In 3 months, you're going to be a disaster.
Yeah.
And it's that discipline, that daily checks, those controls in check, that keeps you lean. That's another reason why companies go out of business, because they have this beautiful run through. They go exponentially high, and then they think it's going to stay high forever. So they overhire, right, and they overspend. Boom! And all of a sudden, they're in trouble.
Yeah. And I think, just one thing on the metrics, and I hate to be too technical, but I think it's important, is helping your team to critically think about metrics. All right, so we go back to this product-led growth. All right, so we had 400 people that signed up for our community. That's awesome. Well, how many have closed? How many are active opportunities, right? How quickly are those progressing? Like really helping folks to think through, it's great that we have the number, but how does that number truly move the needle? How does it move the business? And the next level of analysis there. I think those things are just critical to growth. And one of the analogies, obviously, we're based in Georgia. Unfortunately, Georgia did not make the college football playoffs, but Alabama did. I don't know when this will air, so we won't spoil anything. You think about when the level of precision that those football coaches, whether it's in the NFL or in college, that they use, because minuscule decisions, micro movements, the metrics that they have on every single play, the complexity there to be able to get better. I mean, they're looking at that tape for hours and hours after every game. I think businesses have to do the same thing. You have to replay, what did we do well there? What did we do? What can we do better? Are we projecting? Are we doing all the right things to win for the future? And you got to kind of dig into the details.
That's for sure. And that, one of my mentors told me, you cannot manage what you cannot measure. Mm-hmm. So measure is so important. And the metrics for us, we run metrics on a weekly basis. Because my mama always told me, if you take care of the cents, you won't have to take care of the dollars.
Right.
And that makes sense too, right?
Oh yeah, that's absolutely true. Absolutely.
Like another saying, you kill the monster when it's a baby. You don't let the monster to become huge. You kill it when it's a baby, right?
Right. No, that's great advice.
Gordon, going back to sales, how did you started your sales career? When I became a professional salesperson is when I started to become rich. When I reached my first $1 million in net worth, I look back and I realized it was thanks to saying yes to learning how to become a professional salesperson. Yeah. And how to actually add value to the people and not become like a used car salesman trying to deceive people. And that's why people don't like sales, because they, in their mind, is like every salesperson is a dishonest person, and it's the complete opposite. Like for me, a salesperson is a professional that consults to the potential client whether or not their solution is adequate for them or not.
Right. Yeah, no, I think you're exactly right. There's a lot of misconceptions about it. I think that I had some good mentors in this, going back to thinking about this defense contracting world and where you don't have a lot of customers. Every interaction that you have in that world has to be very disciplined. It's very disciplined. It's pre-planned. And so, you have to have like just continuous communication. Like we have a saying here that if you don't have comms, like the military term, no comms is no deal, like almost 100% of the time, because they've moved on, they've lost interest, they have a competitors in there. And so I just think communications are a key piece. Adding value is a key piece. You can't just be pinging on people and saying, hey, can you hop on a call? What do you think? Like send them a piece of collateral that adds value, that shows that some thought leadership. I think those kind of interactions are critical. And then, go back to too, like there needs to be a natural cadence too. You can push a little bit, but I think that there also has to be, you can push, but there has to be some reciprocity. And when I would say that when we don't see any reciprocity or, going kind of back to lack of communication, you kind of have to move on. You just have to move on. It doesn't mean you can't be persistent and you can check in, but you got to go to folks that it's a little friendlier engagement, and they're giving you some good back and forth to move that deal forward.
It's true. And also people have to remember that for everything knows you will get a yes, but that yes, the yes will actually make your life come through. Right. I think who was it? I think Bill Gates is one that said that he went and exposed his idea of Microsoft to 1,000 people, and then he said, out of those 1,000 people, 100 people took the call. Out of those 100 people, 10 people did something about it, and of those people, 5 people actually acted on what they said.
Yeah.
And those 5 people make him a billionaire.
I actually met, I won't say his name, but I actually met one of the first institutional investors this summer. And it was fascinating hearing some of the early stories there with him. But yeah, absolutely. I mean, raising money might be one of the hardest sales jobs ever, right? Because there's a whole heck of a lot of no's in that. And especially when you go into these cycles, like right now on the growth equity side, it's a very kind of down cycle because people sort of overextended in 2021 and 2022. And so, you catch these things in phases, but that just means you have to run a very disciplined business. You have to make people, anyone that said no, you want to make them feel bad they said no, because you prove out with your results, and then hopefully they come back and want still want a piece of the action. But yeah, no, you're exactly right. There's a lot of rejection no matter what part of sales, but from inside sales to CEO, there's a lot of rejection. You got to be resilient about it.
And also staying humble. Like for us, we have so many times we have had clients that we're getting into a bid, and they probably go with somebody else, not because we were not the best, but because we were not the cheapest. Mm-hmm. So they choose another vendor because they're less money than us, just to find out 6 months later they come back to us because what the other guys did was ruined their project, and now they needed to get it rescued. So now they have half the budget, and now they want to hire us, and we always say yes, and we always deliver. So that's the best thing that could happen to you. But you have to be humble enough to take the business when they come back.
Right. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's critical.
Gordon, thank you so much for your time. It's been over 40 minutes now.
Yeah.
I would love to close this podcast with one last question.
Yes.
If you had access to a billboard in front of the busiest highway on earth, what would you write in it? What would be the best advice for humanity that you can give?
Wow, I've never been asked that question. That's really, really good. I would say, might have to be just the golden rule, right? Do unto others as you would have done unto yourself. And I think we could simplify that and say, when you treat others well, the good things will happen. And I really think that, it's one of those things. And by the way, that can be very hard in business. I often think that sometimes popular culture doesn't teach us that. But I think at the end of the day, life is short. You have to be just really cordial and polite with people that you're closer to. Treasure those moments. And I think when we lose sight of that, we probably are not the leaders we should be. And so, it's one of those things that I try and think about. Hopefully I put it into practice. I know I can always get better, but I think that's a pretty good rule and pretty good billboard for sure.
That's beautiful, Gordon. I'm a computer scientist, so I'm always looking for patterns. And after over 150 episodes, I can tell you that one of the biggest patterns of my guests, the leaders that I interview, is that they have a servant leadership approach, mm-hmm. and they are doing unto others what they would like to get done unto them. Mm-hmm. And if you look at that, those are the teachings of Jesus Christ. Mm-hmm. If you think about it, the disciples asked them, out of the 10 commandments, what are the 2 most important ones? And then he said, love God, your Lord, with all your might and all your power. And number 2, love your neighbor as you love yourself. Mm-hmm. And that to me is, number 1, you have to learn how to love yourself. And then you have to treat others with the same love that you will have for you. Mm-hmm. If you do those 2 things in life, it's impossible not to be successful.
For sure. Yeah, that's great wisdom.
Gordon, God bless you. Have a beautiful rest of the Christmas season if I don't see you again. And if people would like to buy your services, get into your browser security system, how can they find you?
Conceal.io. You can find us there. Sign up for our community. Sign up for a form, and we'll be in touch. Like any good SaaS company, we'll respond within 5 minutes. And we would love to. We love working with our potential clients. So thank you, David. Really appreciate the opportunity. It's great to be with you.
Super, Gordon. God bless you. Have a good one.
Right, thank you, sir. Take care.
Cheers.
That's all for today's episode of the Break Free Podcast. Head on over to iTunes and subscribe to the show. Starting your own business can be tough, but it doesn't have to be. Visit davidmansilla.com to pick up a copy of the #1 international best-selling book, Breaking Out of Corporate Jail. Expand what you consider to be possible and reach your full potential. And join us on the next episode.